Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now we're going into week 5, which is a continuation with Courtney Ramsey, who is one of my work BFFs, as well as a professional speaker and trainer and someone who has ADHD. So she's going to continue the amazing information that she started last week and tell us more about ADHD. Quick reminder, as we're going through this series on neurodivergence, we are talking about adults in the workplace. We're not talking about kids. We're not talking about the extreme sides of the spectrum. We're talking about adults in the workplace. And if at any time we misspeak, we say something that's not accurate, we're learning alongside you. So make sure and drop it in chat, reply to email, however you communicate with me, let me know. And I guarantee you I will do my best to fix it in the future. All right, without further ado, let's get back to Courtney.
Let's talk about how ADHD can actually impact relationships, both at work and at home. Now, you probably realize that some ADHDers struggle with impulsivity and emotional regulation. So if you've ever worked with someone who kind of wears their emotions on their sleeves or has one thing go really wrong in their day and they can't recover from it, that makes them super hard to work with or work for. And that is something I definitely noticed for my son. He has been, from a very early age, the kid that we call it flipping his lid, kind of like a boiling pot that boils over. He flips his lid super easily, and it's really, really hard for him to come down. So once he loses it, it's really hard to get that emotional regulation back in check. Next up is forgetfulness and communication challenges. Now, for this one, it might look like missing a really important date or struggling with deadlines or even struggling to stay focused in a conversation with the person that they're talking to. And of course, that can make other people feel really neglected and undervalued. And it can also lead to someone not trusting that person because they're not delivering the things they said they would deliver. We mentioned before hyperfocus and attention, but that can definitely be a problem when it comes to relationships. Because a lot of times when someone is directly in front of me, for example, they get all of my love and all my attention, and I am all about them. But as soon as they are out of sight, they are out of mind. And that can lead to that person feeling like they're not important to me and like I'm ignoring them. Now, it is not on purpose. And for me personally, it doesn't mean I don't care about that person and I don't love them. It's just that it's very hard for me with my little ping pong brain to keep coming back to the things I need to do to nurture a relationship. So if you're that friend who always feels like you're doing all the work, it might be because the friend that you're doing all the work for has ADHD and they kind of struggle with that object permanence thing. You're out of sight and you're out of mind. And again, it doesn't mean they don't love you and value you. They just have a hard time remembering to do the small things like calling you and reaching out. But when they think of you, oh my gosh, they're going to call you and be so excited to talk to you. And hopefully it's going to feel like you pick up exactly where you left off. Finally, the one thing I want to tell you about that I think is super important that not a lot of people talk about is something called RSD, or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Not all people with ADHD have RSD, but a lot do. And I'm quite certain my son and I both have this one. So RSD is an extreme emotional sensitivity to perceived or actual rejection, criticism, or failure. And y'all, it can make social interactions and relationships particularly challenging. Because for me, even minor constructive criticism or feedback, or that minorly passive-aggressive, sarcastic remark can feel really personal, and it can be really painful for me. It can also cause me to ruminate. And by that, I mean, I'm that person who can't let things go. So if I think someone's upset with me, if someone said something that really hurt my feelings, I'm going to replay it in my head, much like a truck that is stuck in the mud and constantly spinning its wheels. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really want to move on, but it's like my brain doesn't let me. And that can be really hard because it can cause, again, a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. It can really impact your confidence levels as well. A prime example for me is something that happened to me over 6 years ago at this point. One of the very first keynotes I ever did for a fairly large audience did not go very well. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like the end of the world. I didn't blank out, I didn't fall, I didn't lose it completely, but it was a very flat keynote at 8 in the morning with people who had been drinking the night before, and they were not entertained by me. And all I remember is just being up on stage knowing that they are not enjoying what's going on. And then having that verified when I step off stage and no one's making eye contact with me. Not one person is saying, good job, that was great. It was horrible. And to this day, I cannot let that go. High expectations, really high expectations of myself. I don't know if that's common with everyone with ADHD, but for me, it definitely is. So now that you know how it impacts relationships and some of the other things that go on behind the scenes, let's talk what you can do as a leader or even a coworker if you are working with someone with highly functional ADHD. The first thing I can tell you as a tip is to leverage their strengths. You know that old story, the tortoise and the hare, right? Remember that good story back in the childhood thing where the tortoise and the hare, they're having a race. The tortoise runs the race very slow and steady and eventually wins because he is slow and steady and makes it to the finish line. The hare is super excited in the beginning, takes off running, does all these great things, but gets really distracted along the way, does a few things, eventually finishes the race too, but actually finishes after the hare. Again, y'all, that is me to a T. I'm a very strong starter and I will absolutely finish things when I really thoroughly enjoy them, but I'm better at the beginning of a project compared to the end. And it is certainly a struggle for me when I start to get bored of something. Now, part of that is like, suck it up, buttercup, right? That is part of being in the working world. We're not going to always enjoy all the projects we work on. I totally get that. Just know for your ADHDers, it can be even harder to stay focused and finish those really long projects. So if you can play to and leverage your strengths and give them shorter projects, that can be highly effective. Next up, structure plus flexibility. By that, I mean, give them a balance of you want to give them some structure, but also give them the flexibility and the autonomy to get different projects and tasks done as they see fit. One thing I've learned about myself is that along the years of me being in the working world, I've learned to give myself structure, but sometimes I'm not very good at it still, which is where that whole procrastination thing can come in. So I recommend if you're the leader of someone with ADHD, work in a lot of like check-ins, especially for large projects. And if you need to be the one to help break like large tasks into smaller chunks, do that for them as well. I'll give you more on that one in just a second. Next up is open communication. The good news is that here in 2024, ADHD is very much widely diagnosed at this point, and it's really not so much a stigma as it used to be. But that being said, not everyone is comfortable talking about it, especially if they're like me and they got diagnosed later on in life. So if you know this is something they struggle with, I recommend that you ask them about it and ask what you can do as their coworker or their leader to help keep them on track. Next up, compassionate accountability. Things are going to go wrong and people need to be held accountable. But when things do go wrong, the more you can focus on what we can do better next time and finding solutions, the better. Remember that people with ADHD can be highly sensitive to criticism. And that does not mean you can't give them constructive criticism. It just means that you may need to be holding yourself accountable too for delivering that criticism in the right way, but also being the kind of leader who, again, checks in often and provides structure. Now, for some leaders, that can feel a little bit like babysitting, right? I promise you it's not. What you're really doing is you're being a good leader because you're adjusting your style to someone who has a brain that works just a bit differently than everyone else. And that leads me to my last point, which is something you can do, which is breaking down bigger tasks into smaller chunks with deliverables and milestones along the way. Let's say that you have a board of directors presentation due in 5 weeks, and you want someone who has ADHD on your team to build out your presentation for you because they are so creative, they know the business, they can do a really good job, right? Well, you have 5 weeks. So what you could do, you could give them the assignment and just hope they're going to get it accomplished. But what you need to do is break it down. So perhaps in week 1, all you ask them for is an outline of what that presentation would have in it. Just like a content outline, right? Maybe in week 2, you ask them for a deck draft, a PowerPoint deck, just the draft of what it might look like, almost like a skeleton, if you will. In week 3, you get them some feedback, and now they build you a more built out deck with talking points. Again, you get them feedback, and in week 4, you get basically a finalized deck that has all your feedback incorporated into it with those talking points. And now you have a full week to give them even more feedback for more changes if needed. Or you can start working with a deck to make it your own and make sure you're ready for that presentation. I promise you that if you don't break things down and have those check-ins, for someone like me, they're going to wait until week 4 to even start building out the presentation. And you may not have what you want, and you may not have enough time to truly make it your own. So again, break down those bigger tasks into smaller chunks and give them lots of milestones and check-ins along the way. So by understanding and accommodating those unique challenges, here's the thing. You are not just helping them, you're actually helping yourself be a better leader, and you're helping boost your team's overall performance. In closing, what I can tell you is that ADHD can get a bad rap, but y'all, I've seen it firsthand. It can also be a superpower when it's managed well. It's really all about finding the right balance and creating an environment where individuals like myself can thrive. So whether you're leading someone with ADHD or maybe you're navigating the challenges of it yourself, remember that it's not about overcoming it alone. It's really more about finding all the strategies that work for you and getting people along the way to help you along that journey. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you really have a better understanding of what high-functioning ADHD looks like at work. Take care.